What's up, everyone? This is Fromal and Dan Favale here with the Full Court Press. Today we're going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets. They're 3-7 through their first 10 games, which is completely shocking based on the preseason expectations that most of us did have. They already had Darren Williams, Brook Lopez, and Joe Johnson in place. They had a Jason Kidd to the bench. We had no idea how that would work out, but it was generally assumed that the acquisition of Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett would push them over the top, make them one of the contenders in the Eastern Conference. So, Dan, were we completely wrong in evaluating this team? Are they going to get things together? What's going on with them?
Well, I just want to state that I was not wrong about this team. I've called them the most overrated team in the NBA for quite some time now, before the season started, actually.
But even when you called them overrated, you still had them as a playoff team.
That's what I'm getting at. I had them 5th in the Eastern Conference. I still think they'll be around there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them finish, maybe 6th. But, again, it's still early, and the Eastern Conference is so messed up. It's just, there's no team that's emerged as that runaway team outside of the Pacers, and obviously the Heat will get there if Dwayne Wade ever decides to play again. So, I don't see them missing the playoffs. I'd be shocked. Would you say, if they miss the playoffs, would you say that'd be the biggest surprise in NBA history in terms of not meeting expectations?
I don't think so. I think you have to look at last year for that one. We assumed that the Lakers last year would be even more of a super team with Kobe, Nash, and Dwight Howard coming together. I mean, they were put up there with the Thunder as competitors for the number 1 seed and struggled to make the playoffs. So I think that was even more of a surprise. But this would still be in that realm if they were in the lottery.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a bigger surprise for me because the Western Conference is so good and the Eastern Conference isn't. So when you have a team that's not built like the Lakers, but it has that same atmosphere, that same appeal, if you take a super team and you put them in the Eastern Conference, I automatically expect them to have a greater success than if you were to put them in the Western Conference. It's definitely comparable, but I see it being as a bigger surprise because of how weak the Eastern Conference generally is.
Sure, I mean, I can see that, but that still begs the question, are they going to drop out of the playoffs? I mean, is that even a possibility at this point? We're 10 games in, and they're playing the Bobcats as we speak.
I think you even have to look at, let's say they're not in the top 8. Like, that division, they could have a shot at winning the division because this could be one of those divisions where you could have Milwaukee Bucks type record from last season and still win the division. So I think that right there will afford them the opportunity to at least get 8th. So I know I said before they won't get if they don't get in the top 8, but they'll at least get 8th. If they don't make the playoffs, I'll make a bet or something right now to do something absolutely terrible because I'll be shocked. They have to get at least that 8th spot. I'd still put them in that 5 or 6 range, though.
I'm starting to have my doubts about their ability to get up to 5 or 6. I mean, nothing has pointed toward an immediate turnaround. Darren Williams is already being plagued by injuries. I mean, this isn't supposed to happen until much further into the season. I know he was great after the All-Star break last year, but this is not a good sign. I mean, he's already missed a handful of games, and yeah, Sean Livingston looked pretty good replacing him, but do you really want to go to war with Livingston as your starting point guard, or even someone you have to rely on in crucial games? I just haven't seen any positive signs, really, other than the development of Brook Lopez.
Yeah,
that would point towards them rebounding.
Side note, can we start, I've taken some shit for this, can we start calling Brook Lopez Brolo? Is that an okay nickname? That's what I've been calling him for the past year.
I've heard that a bunch. I don't know if it's just from talking to you, though.
Well, I would like to make a movement to say Brolo from now on. I'd like to make it okay for it to be a recognized nickname, kind of like Nintendo for Dennis Schroeder on the Hawks.
Especially since he's a Stanford bro. I can see that.
All right, so
I'm down with that.
It's been decided. But back to your point, it's funny that you're saying that you can't picture them going to war with Livingston as their starting point guard. It's funny that we even have to entertain the thought of that happening because they should have a better backup point guard. Again, like Livingston is, he's fine, but is he a legitimate stand-in? That's what
on a normal team, I think it's fine. I mean, if you want to put him as like the backup point guard on the Heat, That's okay.
That's not a normal team.
Well, let me finish. On the Pacers, that's okay. But I'm calling them an abnormal team because Darren Williams is such an injury-prone point guard who's so crucial to that team. I mean, off the top of your head, how many teams can you think about that rely so heavily on a point guard to run the show and he's injury-prone? The Golden State Warriors and the Nets, right?
Yeah, well, I was just about to liken it to the Warriors, who don't really have a good backup. So you're right, they do have to have a better one than Livingston. I guess I can see your case on a normal team or a team that, like the Pacers or Heat, that don't really operate with a true point guard. They use point forwards mostly. So I definitely see that. If Deron Williams is the key to that whole team, and I think it's been agreed on by everyone that that's the case ever since they were formed, that he needs to be there to kind of tie this all together because Pierce is an okay playmaker. He can run point forward. And again, Garnett is a phenomenal passer for a big man, but no one on that team can set others up like that one guy. Not Livingston. There's not another guy that could do that. And I feel like on a team where you have all these, not only talents, but egos trying to be coalesced into one, you need that guy who's going to balance everything. I mean, look at the Knicks, who are in disarray because they don't have that pass-first floor general. And right now, the Nets don't have that either.
For me, it really came to a head when they were playing the Phoenix Suns. That overtime game that Joe Johnson hit the floater to win. Once Williams went down in that game, Livingston was great at the beginning once he came in as a replacement. But their offense completely devolved down the stretch, and it became, let's figure out how close we can establish Brolo to the basket. See, I'm going to use it for you. And then we're just going to let him go to work. That's all it was. We're going to feed him the ball on the post. If he scores, great. If he misses, whatever. If that doesn't work, we're going to give him the ball in mid-range and let him go to work. It did work that game, but that's not a consistent strategy. And I'm not sure I trust Jason Kidd enough to develop anything else.
Well, he's doing nothing, right? We saw Howard Beck wrote the other day that he doesn't do anything. That's another tough thing. You're throwing this quote-unquote super team in the hands of a rookie head coach. And it's great that everyone thinks that he was a good coach as a player already, but if you look at what they're running offensively, it's so simplistic and pedestrian, and that's weird, even without Deron Williams, because of how much offensive firepower they have in that starting lineup.
If I remember correctly, there was a quote in that Beck article where a scout said he'd seen 10 plays run by the Nets all season.
Wow.
Not during one game, all season.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me, but it's still shocking at the same time because 10 plays in 10 games or 11 games, 10 games is ridiculous.
And that would work for a team like the Heat where you have a LeBron or you have established chemistry between your star players, but not on what's essentially amounting to a pickup basketball team.
Yeah, and it's just everything just seems so thrown together, and there's so much improvisation, and the wrong kind of improvisation. Not, let's keep the ball moving and see where this play takes us, but where, like, we're just going to resort to isolations and who can just maybe score. We're going to force up shots. And they don't look like they have a plan. And I guess that comes back again to Deron Williams being injured. But as we talk, I could literally see them missing the playoffs now. I don't think they will, because you look at how weak the East is. Like, who else is going to be better than the Nets long run this season? Do you see it being the Bobcats? Do you see it being the Wizards or the Raptors or the Celtics?
I mean, I could see all of those teams being better. Let's throw in the Pistons and maybe eventually the Cavaliers as well. I've watched almost every one of their games so far, and I just don't see it. And that kind of lets me segue into the next question I wanted to ask you, which is who's most at fault here? Is it Kidd for not coaching at all? Is it Darren Williams for not being able to stay healthy? Is it Pierce or Garnett for looking like corpses? Am I forgetting something?
I don't think you can blame it on Darren Williams because he hasn't been healthy enough to even say, been on the court enough to say he's underperforming. Yeah, he's underperforming, but he's injured. So what do you expect him to do? I'm hesitant to put the blame on Kidd because they do have a pretty solid assistant coaching staff that should be able to guide him. And I'm never compelled to blame the coaches as much as I am the players.
To be honest, I feel like it's fun to point a kid as a scapegoat, but he's not really the source of the problems because he does have that core of assistance.
Yes, but players are paid to buy into the system of the team they're playing for. If they're not, be it if they agree or not, I understand it's the coach's job to kind of cater and morph his idea to fit the needs of his team, but players need to buy in, and then they need to execute. I'm not accusing the Nets of not buying in to what Jason Kidd's teaching, but at the same time, Pierce and Garnett weren't happy about his let's rest you plan. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but there seems to be a disconnect, and that's what I would blame it on. But if I had to pick a tangible person, you have to go with Pierce and Garnett, don't you? They're not. I understand they're dinosaurs, but they're not even like doing anything. Like Garnett started hot the other night and then sucked. So they're not even doing the intangibles. It doesn't seem like they're getting a response from the locker room. Like how many times did you hear them in Boston talk about hitting the panic button or talk about effort? Back in Boston, they would have got up in people's faces and took care of that. So it's not solely on them, but if you have to pick scapegoat or a pair of scapegoats, it has to be them, doesn't it?
I think so, and that's also the biggest reason that there is still a little bit of hope. Just because they are so talented, and it's hard to decline this much in 1 year, even wearing a new uniform in a new home that you're not as comfortable in. Like, it wouldn't be shocking to me to see them pick it up, but at the same time, again, there haven't been signs. I mean, I'm looking at the standings right now, and, I can point to positive signs for every team in the conference except for them and the Bucks.
I totally understand that, and I guess you want to know what I'm looking at right now? Actually, a replay of Roy Hibbert banking in a 3-pointer at the buzzer when Cole Aldridge came in to defend him. But I digress. I don't see it from them either. I don't see how you could. The win against the Heat was the only convincing thing they've done all season, and it wasn't even wow, the Nets are for real. I saw articles that stated that they were here and that this was going to happen. And the only argument you can make in that regard is that they're built to beat the Heat. They're built to get into the playoffs no matter what seed they are and go from there. That's the only defense of this team I could personally have at this point is they just want to get into the playoffs, be as the 5th, the 3rd, the 8th seed. They don't care. And then just let the Magic with Pierce and Garnett go from there. But you want to see a semblance of competency from Pierce and Garnett before that happens.
My other big problem is that they don't have a calling card yet. I mean, any good team, you can point to it and you can be like, hey, this is a good offensive team. They're going to outscore you on any given night or they're going to shut you down. And if you look at it, they can't score consistently because they have no offensive system to work with and haven't established who that go-to player is. And they've been pretty porous on defense. I mean, they ranked in the bottom 10 for offensive rating and defensive rating.
Oh,
it's hard enough to be a competent team when you're in the bottom 10 for one of them.
Yeah, no, and I want to read you a couple numbers. I know we're not into specifics, but this has been wowing me for quite some time. I'm going to give you, I want to play the over or under 15th game. So we'll say over or under bottom top half of the league. Points scored per game, over under top half of the league.
You're saying what they'll be by 15? Or
no, what they are right now, bottom half or top half?
Bottom half.
Yep, rebounds.
Bottom half. I mean, Brook Lopez is their starting center.
Assists.
Because they don't have one breakdown player, I'm going to say top.
Nope, bottom. And points allowed, bottom.
That's got to be bottom.
And when you're looking at points allowed, assists, and points per game, they're in the bottom 11 of all three. They don't. You're right. They don't.
Where are the positive signs? What points to a turnaround?
There are right now. There are none, but it's still. I understand it's more than 10% of the way through the season, but I've always been that 20 game guy. Once a quarter of a season's in the books, let's start writing teams off. If the Knicks are still blowing game 20, then we write them off. If the Nets still haven't gotten near 500, then you start writing them off. Right now, I just look. How do you not make the playoffs, even if they're not fully healthy, with those 5 players on your team in the East?
I can't explain it, but that's what we're seeing. And I mean, I hate to open this can of worms, but I've got to. Kobe Bryant. All right, so we're talking about him returning from that Achilles injury, and we don't know what to expect. But the prevailing assumption seems to be that he's going to be good because it's Kobe fucking Bryant. You know, that's the argument. And in a lot of ways, it seems to be the same one for the Nets, just in a different context. They're going to make the playoffs because they're the Nets. They have this much talent. We're not going to look at the numbers. We're not going to look at how the players are playing. We're not going to look at how they fit together. They're going to make the playoffs because they're the Nets.
I'm going to counter with something, and it's because I see a big difference in that Kobe Bryant argument that you're trying to make, because I understand it. Are you ready, I'm talking in timing-wise, are you ready to say that David West is done? 10, 11 games of the season. So I think it's kind of that. I don't think they're assuming that the Nets are going to be great, but they're assuming they have to make the playoffs because, one, it's only game 10, and they're the Brooklyn fucking Nets to compare it to Kobe fucking Bryant. So I see a disconnect there, too. I understand what you're saying because it's just assumed that Kobe's going to be great, but the Nets, I don't think anyone's looking at them being like, if they still are, I'll be shocked, looking at them as they're going to be a title contender because of who they have. I think they're looking at the conference. I think they're looking at how early it is, and I think they're also looking at obviously who they have and saying this team is going to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, it begs the whole question, when is it important to recontextualize?
Which begs the question, how long before the Nets should or would they even consider blowing this roster up?
How?
If you could find a taker for everybody on that roster except for maybe Joe Johnson.
You could. I think it would...
I don't think you get rid of Brooke. I think you seriously consider getting rid of Darren. And Paul Pierce and Garnett, and if someone's going to take him, fuck yeah, Joe Johnson.
I mean, I have to admit, I've never even thought about that.
But don't you have to because of what stands to happen after this season? They don't have flexibility, and if Pierce leaves in free agency and then Garnett demands a trade or retires, which is likely if Pierce leaves, one of the two, what do? You want to set yourself up for something.
Well, that actually leads me into one thing I wanted to talk about, because the future is horrid for this team. I mean, they were built to win now at the expense of everything else. And I didn't realize this until pretty recently because it wasn't actually reported when the trade was officially made. But when the Hawks traded Joe Johnson to the Nets, they got the right to swap first-round picks with them in 2014 and 2015. So let's say that the Nets are a lottery team now. Right, so they're gonna get like around the 10th pick in the draft. Just assume with me. They have to give that to the Hawks, who are presumably going to be a playoff team. Then they have to give that pick to the Celtics. Now they're even worse. Pierce and Garnett are a year older. Everybody's declining. They haven't been able to add through the draft or free agency because they're completely capped out forever. Then they have to give that next pick to the Hawks too. They don't have a pick until 2018. How does this team improve? Like, at some point, if they're not, even if they're going to make the playoffs, if they're not going to compete for a title, they might have to blow things up. Because beyond this year, you lose value in the trading market for every one of the pieces. If Darren Williams can't lead this team into the playoffs or into contention, why would any team trade for him? So they almost have to pull that trigger.
Yes, you're so right, and it's so bizarre because when you're looking back, I wasn't really an advocate of the trade they made, but I didn't think it was a trade that they shouldn't have made because those draft picks didn't figure to be high anyway, so it's weird that we're talking about it now. It did help them out financially because they don't have Gerald Wallace's contract. They can get under the cap quicker now because of that trade. I think... And I don't think I'm going to say this is the type of deal that they would need to do. And I know I keep coming back to this player, but he's the standard for bad contracts. Your only option, if you're going to blow it up, you have to make that decision soon. And then you have to make a trade where, like, honestly, if you don't want to build around Darren Williams, and you're looking for a team to take a chance, and the Nets are going to blow it up. This is just worst case scenario. This season, they want to be able to be players sooner than 2017, sooner than 2016. Would you trade Darren Williams' contract for Amari Stoudemire
Just because it expires.
in 2015 as opposed to 2017? If you have the opportunity and you're the Nets and you're going to trade Pierce's expiring contract and you're going to trade Garnett with him because people will still pay him, he's at $12 million a year and that's nothing. And then they can move him after this year too because he's an expiring deal if he agrees to it, obviously. So if you're looking at, I'm going to lay this out. You want to keep Brook Lopez because I think he's amazing.
Agreed.
But you want to get rid of Paul Pierce and Garnett, which is easy, and you're able to dump them. Do you consider making, I'm not even saying Stoudemire, I guess, but do you consider making that trade a horrible contract for Darren Williams because it comes off the book sooner?
So what do you call it when you're worse than stuck between a rock and a hard place?
I don't know.
A net?
Yeah, probably.
I have no idea.
That's a good question, though, right?
There's no answer to that question. Like, neither of those options are particularly appealing. I would say that you almost have to make that move. You almost have to. But again, we're assuming that they don't rebound. And it's important to note that because there still is the chance that with this much talent on the roster, everything coalesces at some point. But assuming it doesn't, yeah, you gotta. Having a chance 2 years in the future is better than having no chance for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one hiccup in that one, again, we know that Pierce and Garnett could be pretty much wiped. They could deal both of them for an expiring contract this year easily, or they could do a straight-up salary dump. I'm sure there's a team willing to just absorb Pierce and or Garnett's salary if they have the means. I think the hiccup would be, what do you do with Joe Johnson? Because he signed through 2016, and if you want to keep Lopez, him and Lopez are going to take up, in 2015, 2016, they're going to take up, almost $42 million by themselves. And that leads to the question, would you make that deal for Darren Williams? Because he clearly won't be the type of player that a team will be like, you know what, we'll take Joe Johnson too. I know we're dealing with a lot of salary, but a team that has big salaries or a ton of cap space, Darren Williams, if they're going to move him, if they don't want to rebuild around him, he's not going to be the type of player that you can package with a horrible contract, unfortunately.
No, I mean, I think you would still have to do it. I also think it's worth mentioning that Joe Johnson is getting a little bit of a bad rap here just because of his contract. I mean, of all the players on the Nets right now, he's actually playing fairly well.
I love Joe Johnson. I
hate Joe Johnson.
I don't know how to put this. I remember when the Knicks almost signed him, and I was upset because I didn't want him. But I love what he can do in the clutch, and I love that he's been able to just fly under the radar. Not fly under the radar, but been deemed this terrible player, and he's still really good. If you want someone to take the shot on that team right now, you give it to him with the game on the line.
And I mean, I'm a Hawks fan, so I watched him for a long time, and when he got traded, I went on vacation. I'm actually not kidding. I was on the way to Hilton Head, South Carolina, to the beach when he did get traded. So, true story.
So, I'm just talking about it in terms of his contract. I'm not talking about they wouldn't need him, but if they're looking to become a player by 2015, he's the issue. Because I think in a heartbeat, you move Darren Williams for an Amari Stoudemire. That's just hypothetical. Even if it turned out that the Celtics had cap space and it was for... Yeah, I don't even know. But I'm just saying, you have to make that deal. I don't think they can blow it up unless they find a taker for Joe Johnson. He would have to be the one that starts it, in my opinion. I don't think you can justify moving any of the other guys unless you can move him. We're getting so far ahead of ourselves, so I guess to get
back on topic a little bit, we're going to play a different game. We played the over-under, the top 15 earlier. I'm going to name a team. It's going to start out a little silly because I'm going to start at the top of the standings right now, and I want you to tell me if they're going to have a better record than the Nets at the end of the season. Right?
Oh, boy. I'm ready.
Pacers.
Better.
Heat.
Better.
Bulls.
Better.
76ers.
Worse.
You had to pause on the 76ers. Let's just think about that for a second.
I had to pause because, again, I'm of the mind that Sam Hinkie will never let Michael Carter-Williams play again if it gets to that point, and he'll trade Thaddeus Young and Evan Turner for a few IOUs. So
Sure.
I'm going to definitely worse. Because they're a tanker. If tankers are going to be tankers, they're going to do everything they can to tank. How many times can I use tank in a sentence?
That's fair. Hawks.
Better.
Bobcats.
Worse.
Pistons.
This is the toughest one. I'm going to say worse.
Magic.
Worse.
Raptors.
They're in that same Pistons category. I'm going to say worse because I think Masai is going to wind up doing something crazy.
All right. Cavaliers.
Fuck. This is getting increasingly difficult. I'm going to say worse.
Celtics.
Worse.
Knicks.
Better.
Nets. We are talking about the Nets, so that's stupid. Wizards.
Worse.
And then the Bucks.
Worse, I hope.
So you've still got them as the 6th seed in there, interestingly enough.
You know what it is? Is that I see... everything is subjective, obviously, but I'm looking at teams that could have better records. Like, let's say the Raptors, or let's say the Sixers kept playing like this. I'm looking at teams that I see know they're in the middle, and they will blow it up if it turns out they're not destined for a lottery pick. And in the Nets, I don't see that. I don't see them blowing it up. I think they should if it gets to game 25, and if they're game 25, if they're, let's say, 8-17, how do you not blow it up? How do you not?
No,
I don't think they will.
That.
But how do you not? I don't think they will, but how do you not? I think they have to stick with this because they're not supposed to be in the middle, if that makes any sense. You have teams like the Hawks that would be perfectly, sorry in advance, be perfectly content with being in the middle. But I still see the next 5th or 6th. I don't trust the Eastern Conference. And the Wizards and the Cavs have both sucked something awful this year.
Yeah, but there are actually positive signs there.
What is the positive signs aside from the game? All right, yeah, I'll give it to you. Never mind. Let's move on.
So for me, I think that looking at this, I was doing the same exercise in my head. The differences are, I think the Bobcats, the Pistons, and maybe the Cavaliers and the Wizards could finish ahead of them as well. I could see them dropping down to like 10.
If I had to lowball it, I would say 9. I don't think there's a scenario in my head where the Bobcats and the did you say the Raptors?
No.
You didn't say the Raptors? Who'd you say again?
I said the Bobcats, the Pistons, and then the Cavaliers and Wizards.
Oh, the Cavaliers, Wizards, and Bobcats. I don't see all three of them having a better record than the Nets. We've already had a passionate debate about the Bobcats. I don't see them as a threat. I mean, Al Jefferson's ankle injury, that keeps cropping up.
It's worth noting that as you say that, the Bobcats are up 40-37.
Well, we're talking about the Nets right now. I mean, they're still without, Andre Karolinko and Brook Lopez, who's apparently the glue that holds those fuckers together.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that worries me too, because is what he's doing sustainable? I mean, he's been injury prone throughout his career. He's not a great rebounder. He's playing ridiculous defense at the moment. I don't know how long that's going to keep up with this offensive workload that they're giving him.
Well,
so I mean, if anything, that's a negative sign to me.
I see everything Brooks doing as a positive sign because I saw the change in defense last year. So that's a positive to me. The rebounding is always going to be an issue. I think he's capable of shouldering the offensive burden. My biggest concern with him and with all big men that have feet issues is health. So, because they're supporting a lot of weight. So, what is going to happen to him?
It's interesting to me that, like, last year, I felt like I saw him start to get those defensive instincts. And that's why he was blocking shots.
I thought Kevin Garnett was going to make him a defensive stud.
Yeah, but this year he has those instincts and he's making the plays. Because he doesn't have to think about the instincts. They've become de facto instincts. And I think that's been the biggest development.
And I think he's the one, again, if they decide to blow it up, that you build around. And I think that's why you have to make the call early because maybe, Deron Williams is still viewed as a top-tier point guard. who could be packaged with a Joe Johnson or something. But I'm going to say, so let's make a prediction right now. We're going to say top 6, or no, we'll cut it in almost half. Will the Nets be in the top 8 of the conference or the bottom 7?
So basically, will they make the playoffs or not?
Yes, but this was a cooler way to word it.
Was it?
Well,
no,
right.
They won't make the playoffs. Sometimes you got to be bold.
I'm gonna say they make the playoffs, but I'm gonna say that's assuming that they don't blow it up. Like I think they should by game 25 if their issues aren't resolved. But now that we're done bashing the Nets, I can sense that your bacon is burning like crazy right now, and I know everyone else wants to know. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna find out what's burning Adam's bacon right now.
Bacon gotta be bacon. Only one thing smells like bacon. That's bacon.
So today, it's all about Michael Jordan. I know it's weird because he's been retired for a long time, all that jazz, but who knows, he might come out of retirement again. Regardless, it really bothers me when he is treated as completely infallible. Yes, he's the greatest player of all time. I am not going to argue that. I think he is head and shoulders above everyone who's played the game. Personally, Bill Russell is in my number 2 spot. That's not really relevant. Michael Jordan is the best player of all time, but that does not mean he's untouchable. If we treated all greatest of all times like that, then Bill Russell would still be the greatest of all time. And before him, George Mikan would still be the greatest of all time. So it's something that changes. Every couple generations or so, a new player is going to come along. Maybe it's LeBron James. Maybe it's not. I don't really want to get into that. I think he might be on pace to pass Jordan, but there's so much of his career that has yet to play out. But it kind of grates on me when the current GOAT is treated as completely untouchable and we mythologize every part of his game. Was Jordan a great jump shooter? No, not really. I mean, he was great at making those contested mid-range shots that Kobe thrives on now. He was never much of a three-point shooter until later in his career. So for me to hear people say that he's a better shooter than LeBron, no, sorry, that's wrong. So it's important to keep everything in context. Like, yes, you can call him the greatest, but that doesn't mean that every part of him is the greatest and will always be the greatest.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what's burning Adam's pounds and pounds of bacon. We want to hear what makes you sizzle, and we also want to know why you think the Nets are not going to win this year's NBA title. For Adam, formerly